The crimson sun of Zorath hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the jagged crystal spires that jutted from the alien landscape. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and the distant hum of hovering drones filled the atmosphere as King Vorthan paced anxiously within his obsidian-walled throne room. His elongated form, clad in flowing robes interwoven with threads of liquid light, moved with a grace that belied the turmoil brewing within him. 2 weeks ago, while conducting diplomatic negotiations near the edge of their solar system, Vorthan's royal escort had been ambushed by space pirates wielding experimental plasma weapons. Against all odds, a human cargo vessel, captained by a grizzled merchant named Elias Thorne, had intervened. The human vessel, though primitive compared to Zorathian technology, had managed to disable several pirate ships using clever maneuvering tactics that even the advanced AI systems of Zorath couldn't anticipate. Elias Thorne's actions had saved not only the king but also prevented the theft of crucial diplomatic documents containing sensitive information about Zorath's defense networks. This unprovoked act of bravery from a member of the supposedly lesser-evolved species had sparked something unprecedented in Zorathian history, a debt of life owed to a human. The Council of Elders had convened immediately upon their return, their crystalline faces glowing with concern. According to ancient Zorathian law, a debt of life must be repaid in kind, but never before had such a debt been incurred with an off-world species. The implications were staggering. Zorathians prided themselves on their isolationist policies and technological superiority. To acknowledge a debt to a human challenged everything they believed about their place in the universe. Vorthan stared at the holographic image of Captain Thorne projected before him, studying the human's weathered face and piercing eyes. There was something unsettling about owing his life to this creature, whose very existence represented everything Zorathians considered primitive and unworthy. Yet the law was clear, and as king, he must honor it, regardless of personal reservations or societal implications. The weight of tradition pressed heavily upon his shoulders as he considered the various options presented by his advisors. Some suggested offering advanced technology as compensation, while others proposed establishing formal trade relations. But each alternative violated the spirit of their ancient laws. The debt required a gift of equal value, life for life. As he dismissed his council for the evening, Vorthan found himself drawn to the private chambers of his daughter, Naira. Unlike her ethereal siblings, Naira had been born with features that marked her as different. Her skin bore irregular patterns that shifted uncomfortably under light, and her eyes glowed with an intensity that made direct contact difficult for most Zorathians. While these characteristics would have been considered beautiful or intriguing among humans, they rendered her practically invisible in Zorathian society, where uniform perfection was worshipped. She spent most of her days in solitude, poring over ancient texts and studying the cultures of other worlds. As Vorthan approached her chambers, he couldn't help but notice how the servants avoided looking directly at her door, their movements hurried and furtive. The irony wasn't lost on him. His people, who prided themselves on their enlightenment and sophistication, practiced their own form of discrimination against those who didn't conform to their rigid standards of beauty. He paused outside her door, considering the path that now seemed inevitable, yet profoundly disturbing. Naira sat alone in her chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of distant galaxies and alien civilizations. Her fingers danced through the three-dimensional displays, manipulating star charts and cultural data with practiced ease. The walls of her sanctuary were adorned with artifacts collected from various worlds, each piece telling a story of civilizations she would likely never meet in person. Her unique appearance, so reviled by her own kind, fascinated her as she studied the diverse forms of beauty across the universe. Her heart quickened when she sensed her father's approach, a rare occurrence that usually preceded another lecture about proper behavior or attempts to correct her appearance through experimental treatments. When the door slid open, she turned to face him, her luminous eyes narrowing slightly as she read the complex emotions playing across his features. Unlike most Zorathians who avoided looking directly at her, her father always met her gaze, though sometimes with difficulty. "You've come to tell me about the human," she stated matter-of-factly, surprising him with her perceptiveness. "The one who saved your life." Her voice carried no trace of bitterness, only a quiet understanding that cut deeper than any accusation could. She had long since accepted her role as the family's shameful secret, the imperfect heir who would never appear in official functions or diplomatic photographs. Vorthan hesitated, his regal composure cracking slightly as he took in the collection of human artifacts displayed prominently among her treasures. A replica of Earth's moon landing module, a reproduction of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and numerous books about human history and culture. Each item spoke volumes about her fascination with humanity, their imperfections, and their remarkable capacity for growth despite limitations. "Naira," he began, his voice heavy with conflicting emotions, "the council has decided." He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence as he watched her expression transform from curiosity to comprehension. She understood instantly, not because of any psychic ability, but because she had always known her fate would be tied to her differences. In a society that valued conformity above all else, her uniqueness made her expendable, especially when duty called. Her hands trembled slightly as they hovered over a display case containing a collection of human musical instruments. The irony was almost poetic. Her extensive knowledge of human culture, cultivated through years of solitary study, had prepared her perfectly for what was to come. Yet the thought of leaving everything familiar, of being cast away to a world she had only experienced through academic pursuits, sent waves of both terror and excitement coursing through her. "I see," she whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "And does this human know what you plan to offer him? Does he understand our ways, our customs?" Her questions weren't accusatory but rather practical, already beginning to process the implications of her impending journey. The artifacts around her seemed to take on new significance, transforming from mere objects of study into potential tools for survival in an alien world. In the grand audience chamber, beneath the crystalline dome that filtered Zoratha's peculiar light into cascading rainbows, Captain Elias Thorne stood before King Vorthan. His weathered face showed no sign of the awe that threatened to overwhelm him as he gazed upon the alien architecture and the assembled court. The air itself seemed charged with static electricity, making his short-cropped hair stand on end despite the humidity control systems humming softly in the background. Thorne's right hand instinctively reached for the holstered blaster at his side before remembering the protocol insisted upon during this meeting. He was unarmed, just as the Zorathians had requested. Instead, he clasped his hands behind his back, military training keeping his stance firm despite the surreal nature of his surroundings. The gravity here felt slightly heavier than Earth standard, adding to the physical discomfort of standing before creatures whose very presence challenged everything he knew about intelligent life. King Vorthan stepped forward, his elongated form moving with liquid grace. "Captain Thorne," he began, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre that seemed to bypass ears and vibrate directly through the chest cavity. "Your actions have placed me in your debt according to our most sacred laws." Thorne nodded slowly, his dark eyes scanning the gathered nobles whose crystalline features reflected the chamber's light in mesmerizing patterns. "I appreciate the sentiment, Your Majesty," Thorne replied carefully, choosing his words with the same precision he used when navigating asteroid fields. "But I assure you, my intervention was simply good business practice. Pirates disrupt trade lanes, and that affects everyone's bottom line." His attempt at levity fell flat in the solemn atmosphere, earning him a few confused tilts of crystalline heads from the courtiers. The king raised a hand, and immediately the chamber's lighting shifted, focusing attention on a holographic display that materialized between them. It showed detailed scans of human anatomy, neurological patterns, and cultural development metrics. "We have studied your species extensively," Vorthan continued, "and we understand that your people value gifts of equal measure when debts are owed." Thorne's jaw tightened as he recognized the direction of this conversation, his instincts warning him that whatever the Zorathians considered equivalent might not align with human values. When the king finally revealed the nature of his proposed repayment, Thorne's initial reaction was pure shock. His weathered face paled, and his hands clenched involuntarily at his sides. "Your Majesty," he stammered, "I'm honored, truly, but this is beyond anything I could have anticipated." The concept of receiving someone's offspring as repayment, especially under these circumstances, clashed violently with every fiber of his being. In human terms, it felt more like indentured servitude than a gift. The situation grew more complex as Naira entered the chamber, her presence commanding despite her obvious nervousness. Thorne's eyes widened as he took in her unique features. The shifting patterns across her skin reminded him of auroras he'd witnessed from orbit, and her intense gaze held depths he couldn't begin to comprehend. The discomfort in the room became palpable as Zorathian courtiers subtly averted their eyes, their body language speaking volumes about their feelings toward the princess. "This isn't right," Thorne said firmly, stepping forward despite protocol. "She's not some object to be traded." His voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded starships and faced down space pirates, but it wavered slightly as Naira met his gaze without flinching. The contrast between her dignity and the obvious disdain of her own people struck him deeply. Naira interrupted before her father could respond, her voice carrying surprising strength. "Captain Thorne speaks correctly," she announced, addressing the entire court. "However, I am not merely a gift. I have chosen to accept this path, not out of obligation to my father's debt, but because I believe it offers an opportunity for both our peoples." Her words silenced the murmurs that had begun spreading through the chamber. The tension escalated as Thorne processed this revelation. "You're willing to leave everything you know?" he asked, genuinely astonished. "To go with a complete stranger to a world that might not understand or accept you either?" His pragmatic mind raced through the logistics, cultural differences, biological compatibility concerns, and the basic fact that he was essentially being offered a bride under circumstances that would make even the most liberal human societies uncomfortable. Naira's response came with unexpected warmth. "Understanding and acceptance are rarely given freely," she said, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "They must be earned through mutual effort and respect. If your people can learn to value different perspectives, perhaps mine can too." Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent years observing humanity from afar, studying their triumphs and failures with equal interest. The debate intensified as Thorne insisted on discussing terms that would protect Naira's autonomy and ensure her safety. "I'll need to arrange for medical examinations, cultural training programs," he began listing requirements, only to be interrupted by the king's growing frustration. The concept of giving his daughter any form of independence after presenting her as a gift ran counter to Zorathian traditions, creating a fundamental clash between human and alien values. As the discussions continued, Thorne found himself increasingly torn. On one hand, rejecting the offer outright would insult the Zorathians and potentially jeopardize future relations between their species. On the other hand, accepting felt like participating in a transaction that went against everything he believed in regarding personal freedom and dignity. The situation was further complicated by the growing realization that Naira wasn't merely a passive participant in her fate. She was actively shaping it with intelligence and courage that demanded respect. The Zorathian court watched in stunned silence as Captain Thorne and Naira engaged in increasingly heated discussions about the terms of their arrangement. Their voices echoed through the crystalline chamber, creating strange harmonics that resonated with the ship's power conduits. Thorne's arguments about human rights and individual freedoms clashed dramatically with traditional Zorathian views on duty and hierarchy, creating an ideological battleground that neither side had anticipated. Naira surprised everyone, including herself, by matching Thorne's intensity with equally passionate responses. "Your concepts of freedom are admirable," she argued, "but they must be tempered with responsibility. I won't be treated as a charity case or a burden." Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment, though never expecting it to arrive under such circumstances. The courtiers shuffled uncomfortably, and used to hearing anyone, let alone a royal outcast, speak so forcefully. Technical challenges compounded the emotional turmoil as they delved into practical matters. The biological compatibility assessments alone required equipment that neither species possessed fully. Thorne's chief medical officer, Dr. Elena Marks, had arrived with portable scanners that provided rudimentary readings, but they needed to interface with Zorathian technology to gather meaningful data. The resulting hybrid diagnostic array created electromagnetic interference that caused lights to flicker throughout the palace, adding a surreal backdrop to their debates. Cultural misunderstandings proved equally problematic. When Thorne insisted on establishing communication protocols that allowed Naira to maintain contact with her home world, the Zorathian court reacted with visible distress. For them, sending away a family member traditionally meant severing ties completely, a painful truth that hit Naira particularly hard. Her fingers traced the edges of her ceremonial robes as she processed this revelation, her shifting skin patterns betraying her inner conflict. The situation reached a boiling point when Thorne demanded time to consult with his crew and superiors about the unprecedented arrangement. King Vorthan's patience snapped, his crystalline features flashing with anger. "This delay is unacceptable," he thundered, causing the chamber's gravity regulators to fluctuate momentarily. "You will accept our gift now or forfeit it entirely." The threat hung heavy in the air, accompanied by the soft hum of security drones moving into position. Naira stepped between them, her presence somehow calming the rising tension. "Father," she said, her voice carrying an authority that silenced both men, "this union represents more than just repayment of a debt. It could bridge centuries of isolation between our peoples. Surely that deserves careful consideration. Her words carried layers of meaning, acknowledging both her father's wounded pride and Thorne's legitimate concerns about rushing into an irreversible decision. As the day wore on, the chamber transformed into a negotiation arena where principles clashed with practicalities. Food processors struggled to create meals that satisfied both human and Zorathian nutritional requirements, leading to awkward moments when Thorne accidentally consumed something that caused his skin to temporarily change color. Meanwhile, Naira demonstrated remarkable adaptability, quickly learning human social cues while explaining Zorathian customs to Thorne's increasingly overwhelmed crew members. The emotional toll became evident in subtle ways. Thorne's usual confident demeanor cracked occasionally, revealing glimpses of the internal struggle between his sense of honor and his moral compass. Naira, for her part, maintained outward composure while small tells, like the way her fingers traced certain Zorathian symbols or how her pattern shifts accelerated during tense moments, betrayed her anxiety about leaving everything familiar behind. Just as they began making progress on establishing basic guidelines for Naira's transition, a new complication emerged. The Zorathian religious caste arrived unexpectedly, demanding inclusion in the proceedings. Their presence introduced spiritual considerations that neither Thorne nor Naira had anticipated, forcing them to navigate an entirely new dimension of cultural exchange. The religious leaders' crystalline staffs pulsed with energy as they performed rituals that made the human delegation distinctly uncomfortable, while simultaneously accusing Naira of abandoning her heritage. Through it all, the crimson sun dipped lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the chamber. The artificial lighting adjusted automatically, but the changing illumination seemed to mirror the shifting dynamics between the two species. What had started as a straightforward debt repayment had evolved into something far more complex, a test of whether two vastly different civilizations could find common ground through mutual respect and understanding. As preparations for departure accelerated, the atmosphere aboard Captain Thorne's vessel, the Celestial Nomad, grew increasingly tense. The engineering crew worked around the clock modifying living quarters to accommodate Naira's unique physiological needs, while Dr. Marks coordinated with Zorathian medical specialists to develop emergency protocols. The ship's AI system struggled to integrate Naira's preferred environmental settings with standard human comfort parameters, resulting in corridors that alternated between perfect climate control and bizarre atmospheric fluctuations. Naira navigated these changes with remarkable grace, her presence transforming spaces designed for human habitation into something uniquely her own. She decorated her quarters with a blend of Zorathian artifacts and human memorabilia gifted by curious crew members, creating a cultural bridge within her personal space. Her shifting skin patterns responded to the ship's vibrations in fascinating ways, sometimes illuminating dark corridors with bioluminescent displays that reminded older crew members of Earth's deep-sea creatures. Yet the emotional weight of her decision became increasingly apparent. During quiet moments, when formal meetings concluded and technical adjustments paused, Naira could be found staring out observation windows at her shrinking homeworld. Her luminous eyes reflected the stars that would soon become her permanent companions, and her pattern shifts slowed to almost imperceptible movements. Crew members who passed by often hesitated, unsure whether to offer comfort or respect her solitude. Captain Thorne wrestled with his own demons as he oversaw final preparations. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. Every decision he made regarding Naira's integration into human society carried profound implications. His command style, typically decisive and straightforward, adapted to incorporate careful consideration of cultural sensitivities. Staff meetings became intricate balancing acts between operational efficiency and diplomatic sensitivity, with every order requiring multiple contingency plans. The crew's reactions ranged from enthusiastic curiosity to barely concealed prejudice. Chief Engineer Martinez openly expressed fascination with Zorathian technology, frequently engaging Naira in technical discussions that bridged their species' differences through shared professional interests. In contrast, Security Officer Chen maintained a professional distance, her body language suggesting deep discomfort with having an alien aboard, regardless of circumstances. These varying attitudes created a complex social dynamic that Thorne had to constantly monitor and manage. As launch preparations neared completion, unexpected complications arose. The specialized nutrition synthesizer designed to accommodate Naira's dietary requirements malfunctioned during testing, raising concerns about long-term sustainability. Simultaneously, communications officers reported difficulties maintaining stable connections with Zorathian authorities, hinting at political tensions developing in their wake. Each challenge required innovative solutions that pushed the boundaries of both human and Zorathian capabilities. The countdown to departure triggered a cascade of emotional responses throughout the ship. Younger crew members organized impromptu welcome gatherings, attempting to make Naira feel at home through shared meals and cultural exchanges. More experienced personnel focused on practical matters, running simulations and double-checking safety protocols. Through it all, the hum of the ship's engines grew steadily louder, vibrating through bulkheads and bones alike, a constant reminder of the irreversible journey ahead. Naira's interactions with the crew evolved in fascinating ways as departure approached. She demonstrated an uncanny ability to read human emotions through subtle cues others might miss, often diffusing tense situations with carefully chosen words or gestures. Her knowledge of human culture, accumulated through years of study, proved both accurate and surprisingly nuanced, allowing her to navigate social complexities with remarkable skill. Yet there were moments when her alien nature manifested in unexpected ways, her pattern shifts responding to emotional stimuli in ways that left human observers both fascinated and unsettled. The night before launch, an unusual phenomenon occurred. As Naira walked through the ship's botanical garden, a space designed to provide psychological relief for long-duration missions, her presence seemed to affect plant growth patterns. Flowers bloomed in accelerated cycles, their colors shifting to match her skin tones, while vines stretched toward her like seeking tendrils. The ship's botanist, Dr. Patel, documented these changes with growing excitement, suggesting a previously unknown form of bioresonance between Naira and organic matter. This discovery added another layer of complexity to their journey. If Naira's mere presence could influence biological systems so dramatically, what other effects might she have on human environments and physiology? The implications extended beyond simple cohabitation, hinting at potential breakthroughs or dangers that neither species had fully considered. Thorne found himself grappling with questions that transcended immediate practical concerns, touching upon fundamental aspects of interspecies interaction and evolution. As the final hours ticked away, the ship's atmosphere grew charged with anticipation and apprehension. The fusion of human and Zorathian technologies created unexpected synergies, with systems adapting and evolving in real time to accommodate their unique passenger. Lights dimmed and brightened in response to Naira's proximity, while temperature controls adjusted to maintain optimal conditions for both species. These adaptations, while technically impressive, served as constant reminders of the unprecedented nature of their mission. The launch window approached with relentless certainty, bringing with it a convergence of technical, emotional, and cultural elements that defied simple categorization. Every aspect of the mission, from engineering specifications to interpersonal dynamics, had been irrevocably altered by Naira's presence. The celestial nomad stood poised on the threshold of a journey that promised to redefine relationships between species, challenging established norms and opening possibilities neither humans nor Zorathians had dared imagine. In the final hours before departure, an unexpected development threw everything into chaos. The Zorathian High Council transmitted an urgent message, their crystalline avatars flickering with unprecedented agitation. They revealed that certain factions within their government viewed Naira's departure as an unacceptable compromise of royal dignity. A fleet of warships had mobilized, positioning themselves along the designated departure vector. Their demands were clear. Either the agreement would be renegotiated under terms more favorable to Zorathian pride, or they would prevent the celestial nomad from leaving their space. Captain Thorne found himself caught between escalating tensions. On one hand, the Zorathian military presence represented a direct threat to his ship and crew. On the other, reneging on the carefully negotiated arrangement would devastate the fragile trust established between their species. As he reviewed tactical options with his security team, he noticed Naira standing silently by the main viewport, her pattern shifts forming complex geometric designs that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the approaching warship's energy signatures. The situation grew more complicated when Dr. Marks reported alarming findings from her ongoing studies of Naira's biological interactions with the ship's systems. The accelerated plant growth observed earlier had spread to other organic materials, including food supplies and even certain synthetic compounds used in ship construction. While this phenomenon hadn't yet proven harmful, its full implications remained unknown. The doctor's report included disturbing footage of maintenance bots behaving erratically in Naira's presence, their programming apparently influenced by her unique biosignature. Meanwhile, internal divisions within the crew threatened to undermine their cohesion at the worst possible moment. Chief Engineer Martinez led a group advocating for full transparency about Naira's effects on the ship, arguing that the crew deserved to know all risks involved. Security Officer Chan, however, pushed for increased restrictions on Naira's movement through the vessel, citing potential security concerns. Their arguments spilled into common areas, creating an atmosphere of tension that rippled through every deck. The political ramifications extended beyond immediate technical and social challenges. News of the standoff had somehow reached human space authorities, triggering a diplomatic crisis that neither side had prepared for. Representatives from the United Earth government demanded immediate clarification of the situation, threatening to dispatch their own fleet if the Zorathians attempted to enforce their blockade. The possibility of an interstellar incident loomed larger with each passing hour. Naira herself became increasingly withdrawn, spending hours in the botanical garden where her presence continued to trigger remarkable transformations. Plants developed crystalline structures reminiscent of Zorathian architecture, while others exhibited human-like neural patterns in their root systems. She documented these changes meticulously, her scientific curiosity battling with growing anxiety about the consequences of her departure. The garden had become both her sanctuary and her prison, its evolving ecosystem reflecting the complex web of relationships surrounding her. As the deadline approached, Thorn received a personal message from King Vorthan. The transmission revealed deep cracks in Zorathian society, with traditionalists mounting pressure to recall Naira and punish those responsible for proposing the original agreement. The king's voice carried genuine anguish as he confessed that his decision to honor the dead of life had sparked a constitutional crisis, with rival factions questioning the legitimacy of his rule. The carefully maintained facade of Zorathian unity was crumbling, with repercussions that could reshape galactic politics for generations. The situation reached a critical point when the ship's AI detected unusual gravitational fluctuations emanating from the nearest Zorathian warship. These disturbances coincided with periods when Naira visited specific sections of the vessel, suggesting an unknown connection between her presence and the manipulation of spacetime. While potentially useful for navigation, this phenomenon raised troubling questions about long-term stability and the wisdom of proceeding with the journey under current conditions. With launch preparations halted and negotiations at an impasse, Thorn gathered his senior staff and Naira in the ship's conference room. The walls displayed real-time updates of the standoff, positions of warships, diplomatic communications, and internal sensor readings documenting Naira's increasingly pronounced effects on the vessel. As they reviewed the overwhelming complexity of their situation, it became clear that their choices would define not just their immediate future, but potentially the course of interspecies relations for centuries to come. As the crimson sun dipped below the horizon, casting Zorath in twilight, Captain Thorn made a decision that surprised even himself. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and faced Naira directly. "We won't force you into anything," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This isn't about debts or politics, it's about respect. If you want to stay, we'll find another way to honor your father's agreement. But if you choose to come with us, we'll do everything in our power to ensure your safety and freedom." Naira's patterned skin shimmered faintly, her glowing eyes locking onto his with an intensity that silenced the room. For the first time since their meeting, she smiled, not out of obligation, but with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying both relief and resolve. "But I've already chosen my path. I will go with you, not as a gift or a burden, but as someone who believes this union could mean more than either side imagines." The Zorathian warships outside began moving closer, their energy signatures flaring ominously. At the same moment, Earth's fleet appeared on the edge of the system, their ships dark and silent but undeniably present. The standoff had escalated beyond anyone's control, yet Thorn remained calm. He activated the ship's communication systems, broadcasting openly to both fleets. "This isn't just about one life or one species anymore," he declared. "It's about whether we're capable of change, for better or worse." Inside the celestial nomad, the crew scrambled to prepare for whatever came next. Dr. Marks monitored Naira closely, noting how her presence seemed to stabilize the chaotic fluctuations in the ship systems. Martinez reported that the accelerated plant growth was now producing oxygen at levels far beyond normal capacity, as if Naira's biology was subtly enhancing their resources. Even Chen softened slightly, admitting privately to Thorn that Naira's composure under pressure earned her respect. King Vorthan contacted them one last time, his crystalline form flickering with emotion. "My daughter," he said, his voice trembling, You have always been stronger than I gave you credit for. If this is truly what you believe in, then I cannot stand in your way." His words carried a weight of finality, signaling a shift in Zorathian society that no one could predict. Thorn nodded solemnly before turning back to Naira. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She stepped forward without hesitation, placing her hand on his shoulder, a gesture unfamiliar to both humans and Zorathians, yet profoundly meaningful in its simplicity. "I am," she replied. As the countdown resumed, the celestial nomad's engines roared to life, vibrating through every deck. Outside, the Zorathian warships parted reluctantly, their commanders bound by tradition to honor the king's wishes despite their objections. Earth's fleet held position, watching silently as the human vessel prepared to leave Zorathian space with its extraordinary passenger. In the botanical garden, the plants Naira had influenced continued to thrive, their crystalline structures glowing softly in the dim light. They served as a reminder of the connection she shared with the ship, and perhaps with humanity itself. As the nomad broke free of Zoratha's gravity well, heading toward uncharted stars, Thorn glanced at Naira standing beside him on the bridge. Her patterns shifted rhythmically, mirroring the constellations outside. "What happens now?" she asked softly, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space. Thorn smiled faintly. "Now, we figure it out together." And with that, they sailed onward, two species bound by choice rather than fate, stepping into a future neither could fully comprehend, but one they were determined to shape nonetheless.